seen. And Jeff, we always start the show, and last week's shows, I was asking, who's your favorite comic book character? I'm not going to do that because, well, what I am going to ask is this week's question of the week is if you could be any animal in the world, and this is just how we break off and do an icebreaker so we can show you're a real person. If you could be any animal in the world, what animal would you choose to be?
Ooh, that's an interesting question.
I said it was deeper than the normal stuff.
Yeah, it is actually. Part of me wants to say something like, I would love to be like an owl, to be able to fly and things like that. Just, some of the freedoms from the constraints of gravity a little bit and stuff like that.
That makes sense. On that note, you are living every 12-year-old boy, at least when I was growing up, their dream. And that's to create their own comic book. When I was 12, it was Acid Man. That's who I made. He had a red suit, had an acid symbol on his chest. But you've created Aurora Man. And can you tell us about Aurora Man and what he is?
Sure. Aurora Man's just an everyday kind of guy. He's a high school teacher. He's a father and a husband. And he just happens to have found a cosmic-powered staff in a meteor shower and decides to become the superpower of the prairies.
Okay.
So he's just a regular guy who happens to find an object that lets him be a little bit more than just the regular guy.
It's an interesting metaphor because everybody thinks they're just normal people, but really we're not. We're all special in our own way. And you have a superpower. You're a teacher, which is a superpower, believe it or not. People don't think it is. But the truth is you're crafting these children to be decent human beings, hopefully, and have some brains in their heads. So when you go through the creative process, what is this actually born out of? Obviously, there's some realism there with who you are, but what's it born out of past that?
Past that, I mean, yeah, there is a certain amount of connection because, they always say when it comes to writing, you should write what you know. And I know being a teacher and I know being a parent and stuff. So I kept that in there. I didn't want to, deal with a lot of, I guess, no, that's not right. It's fun. My whole creative process is just that. People are like, oh, how long are you going to do this? How many issues do you think you're going to go with Aurora Man? And I say, when I'm not having fun doing this anymore, then that's going to be time to stop. Growing up, I read piles of books and a lot of comic books. And that was my huge thing growing up, obviously. And there was a lot of, just fun superheroes that smiled, that, made mistakes, had some goofs, had some realness to them, but not like grounded in, oh, this has to look and be and feel so specifically real, if we could just like reach out and touch it, kind of thing. So a dash of real and a dash of fun, and turn the wacky dial way up, and then let's just go with it.
Comic books, it's a weird connection, but comic books are almost like a wrestling program. There's a lot of similarities between the two, right? It's that over the top, and you say about dialing things up. That's what wrestling is. And that's what comic books are too. So Aurora Man, he's not the only character in the books. What other characters do you have in there?
I have a growing cast of characters, villains and other heroes, just random everyday people even. It's just fun. I slip people in too. It's just like, here's a crowd scene. Well, I can throw a few people in that I know and put them in that crowd scene and stuff. But yeah, I have other heroes like the mystical Avra Kedavra and Yukon Cornelius, which was a fun one of my first characters that I did. Yukon, I mean, the name comes from the old Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Rankin Bass Christmas special. But through some technical glitches, a lot of the characters in that movie became public domain as soon as it was released because there was a copyright error in it. So I took the name and created this character, and he's a lot of fun. The Governor General was based off of a friend's cosplay, who he then altered his cosplay to resemble my character that I created based on him. So that was really cool. And then villains like the dastardly Baron von Schnitzel and Freeze Frame and the lethal Dr. Winterkill. Well, I guess not really lethal, but she's pretty mean. So Dr. Winterkill is always a fun one to write. And yeah, just some really cool stuff. I have like my family is in the book. I've included them. I've made them characters in there and stuff. So yeah, it's just a wide range of characters and things like that.
You know, the beauty of this is it's an artistic endeavor, but you can tell there's a lot of love that goes into it. On that note, I know you've been launching for a long time, and it's a continual launch no matter what. Where can people find Aurora Man? I think I've included a link down below for your Facebook, but where else can people find you if they want to purchase the book?
The Facebook is a big one. They can contact me directly through there. I have some stuff. I've actually been running out. Personally, I no longer have copies of issues 1 through 5, which is crazy. I never anticipated that happening at all. But I'm in the process of creating a new collection that'll collect those issues into one book. But yeah, other than that, 7-Eleven, if you're coming through Humboldt, carries all of my books, which was a big deal to me, getting them in the convenience store and stuff like that. And it's shown to be a very well received idea. And then the website, www.bigcountrycomics.com. We've recently partnered up, and he carries all my issues. He's got limited quantity of some of them because they've been selling there too. But yeah, he carries everything and is currently my new printing partner. So we're working on some cool stuff together now.
So, did you know that we got a comment? It says from Corinne, that Dr. Winterkill should have been a kind, loving person, if you ask me. Is it based on her, maybe?
Well, there's some there. She definitely, she's a friend of mine. She colleague, and she kind of latched on to the character. Okay. And there's some similarity there. Wasn't intended to be when it set out, but she definitely, I would have to say that's probably her favorite character in the book. And there's a lot of character development coming with that one too yet. So
okay. So past the comic book stuff, I want to talk about the business of comic books. Obviously, it is a business. A while back, you had a Kickstarter going for some stuff. Do you still have that going, or is that gone?
That's been a couple years ago. I did a Kickstarter for issue 0 4 years ago, and then 3 years ago we did a Kickstarter for issue number 1.
Okay.
So those are wrapped up and done. Okay. And a good platform, I guess, to use to get your books out there, to get some attention, some eyes on your stuff. Creating comics is not a cheap endeavor by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, there's all kinds of costs to it. The biggest one being printing, of course. So, you know, being a parent of 5 kids and stuff like that, it's not like I have a pile of spare money lying around.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of kept to a very strict code that I keep my comic book expenses outside of my household budget. So it has to pay for itself. And if it's not paying for itself, then I need to, sell advertising, do fundraising, stuff like that in order to make sure that it pays for itself.
Okay. You said something really important about the cost of it and the printing cost. In general, not just your comic, but in general, in every comic, do you see it being digitized more and more, just like the newspaper has been? Or is comics specific? With me, when I read a comic, I want to have a tactile feel. It's in my hand.
Yeah,
it smells like that weird comic paper.
You've got it in hand to read. Right? Yeah. There's a movement, and has been for a number of years, as digital media becomes more and more of a thing. And we got your ebooks, your digital books and stuff like that. Comics was just a natural fit to go in there next. And it's a thing. Some people, like I have some fans that buy every issue that I release when it releases digitally. They don't necessarily have the physical copies, and that could just be the digital books are a little bit cheaper, and whatever the case may be. I'm not too picky on finding out why their preference is that, but it's just kind of how they prefer to do it. Now, I'm a lot like you though. I prefer to have the book in my hand. Like I picked up a few books from another indie creator last week, and he's like, "Yeah, I can get you the digital ones like right away, no problem." I'm like, "No, that's okay. I want the print ones. So what do you have in hand that's print?" Because I mean, I have a bunch of digital comics loaded on my iPad, and they're the slowest things to read because it's just not the same thing. Plus, I spend a lot of time in front of a screen, be it teaching now or when I'm working on comics. So it's nice to get away from a screen for my entertainment a bit.
That makes sense. It's a strange world we live in now. Yeah, just strange. Where does the inspiration come from for what you do, the art that you create? Are you the illustrator as well, or are you getting that done by others? How does that work? Where does the inspiration come from?
Well, if I was the illustrator, then I'd have to change the title to the Stickman Adventures of Aurora Man. And that being said, I actually plan on honing my Stickman skills to do an actual story in Stickman. But every time I sit down to do it, my brain is just like, oh, but how would we do like all the details and the backgrounds and all this kind of stuff? It's like, okay, I got to slow down here. But no, I work with, I've been very fortunate and blessed to work with a wide variety of artists on this. I always default to that saying, well, I'm just the writer, but lately more and more people are stepping up and saying, no, you don't ever say you're just the writer. The writer is, just as important as the artist and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I know I do the writing, and I've been learning over the last couple of years how to do all the lettering. So all the word balloons and all that kind of stuff. And I'm tinkering a tiny little bit with coloring and stuff like that now too.
Okay. So from an art perspective, comics go back almost 100 years now, right? To the Yellow Kid comics and all that stuff. So who's your personal favorite comic book to read of the big ones? And then who's your favorite right now of the small ones other than you?
Okay. When it comes to my favorite book to read, in the 90s, DC put out a series called Starman, and the character was Jack Knight. He was just a regular guy, and he had the mantle of Starman passed down to him by his dad, and he was very reluctant to do it. And he didn't dress like a superhero. A lot of Aurora Man's look is kind of modeled after his a bit, the leather jacket piece and just the casual look. And it was a phenomenally written. James Robinson wrote it, and it was just amazing. And I reread it pretty much once a year. I reread the entire series. It had 80 some odd issues in there and stuff. And it just flows for me and hit me and stuck with me. Even when I went through a brief spell of stopping collecting comics, that was the book that brought me back because I missed reading that adventure so much. So, that was the big one. I mean, growing up, it was the superheroes, Spider-Man, the X-Men, Batman, and stuff like that. When we get to the indie books nowadays, I'm again very fortunate to be friends with and have met some amazing creators, both Saskatchewan based or in the prairies, as well as heading east to Ontario and into Quebec and stuff. I really enjoy Auric of the Great White North. That one's really well done. Auric and Aurora Man kind of started pretty close to the same time. So they're both the same age wise, creator wise and stuff. And the creative team behind Auric is just awesome. I love them all. And then Jack Grimm, Harbinger of Death, is a local Saskatchewan. Gary Borowski out of Ituna does that. I love that series. Gary's just got a knack for such a great book with that one. There's a team book, Canadian Core. Andrew Lawrence and his September 17 Imprint out of Manitoba did that one, 2 issues in that, and it's great. Actually, Aurora Man has a brief cameo in the second issue of that one. That's how tight we got to be. So, but it was a great book. The artist on that, Justin Schaff, was the artist who helped design Aurora Man and stuff. So it makes sense. My good friend Colin Work, his book Blackthorn, another favorite of mine. I mean, I could go on all day. There's so many awesome books out there right now.
You know, one of the things we haven't talked about is something that you have in the works, and it's the audio adventures I saw was going on, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I'm a big old time radio guy. I love that stuff. Is that what you're basically doing almost?
Yeah. That's basically what's happening with that. I love those old radio shows like that. And I mean, again, given my age range, I grew up with books on records before they were on cassettes and stuff like that. So same kind of thing. Yeah. I kind of figured as much. But so the whole idea of the narration and then the voices and some sound effects and stuff like that, that's what the audio adventures is all about. 3 episodes. We've done 3 episodes already. They're available as podcasts on any podcast platform. And the first one, I have a hard time listening to the first one because, I mean, we were brand new at doing the recording and the mixing and stuff. It sounds a little rough. Episodes 2 and 3 are definitely a lot better, mixed a lot better and stuff. And I'm learning as I'm going, and I'm upgrading my equipment as I'm going and stuff like that, and what I'm using. But yeah, I found that it was like a really cool idea. I was talking with some other creators that were older than I am that remember doing that kind of stuff. Mark Shane Bloom, who created the it was the Northgard character in the 80s. He's a Canadian comic book Hall of Famer, and he's a big fan of Aurora Man, and he actually worked with the CBC on their radio shows and stuff like that, their radio dramas. And it was just really cool to talk to him and stuff. And he's been really helpful as pointing out a lot of free resources for sound library and stuff like that, so that I can get some really good authentic sound effects in there. And, hopefully I'm delivering a polished kind of idea. So far, these first 3 episodes have been stories that haven't been released in the comic book yet.
Okay.
But episode 4, we're trying something new, and we've actually adapted a story that was in issue number 1 into the audio comic format. So I'll release 2 different versions of that. I'll have one that's just the straight up audio comic, and then I'll do one that has like the page turn signals in it, so that if you're following along in the comic book, you know when to turn the page and stuff.
That makes sense. So on a side note, let's get off the comic for a second. You said you're a dad of 5, and we're going to reiterate the comic back in.
Oh yeah, for sure.
When I was a kid, generally comics and superheroes had a moral compass of some kind that was actually pretty stationary, right? Superman and Captain America was right?
Yeah.
Do you feel that that's still the same with what's going on currently in the Marvel universe with everything that they're doing? And do you feel the moral compass is still there? Is it the guiding light the society once had in comics? And I know that sounds crazy, but comics used to be
it's
huge.
Yeah, no, they were a big thing, and yeah, it was that morality piece to it, right? You had your good guys were always your good guys, and your bad guys were always your bad guys. And as you mentioned earlier on in the show, that whole kinship between comics and wrestling. Well, in wrestling, you have that switch,
the heel,
right?
And the babyface.
Yeah, the characters move freely between the two sides, and you're starting to see that more and more in comics, where obviously you have. Well, typically you have your big characters are always good guys, but there has been points where they have, switched sides, or something has caused them to appear that they've switched sides and stuff. And yeah, that was, when I was a kid growing up, your good guys were always your good guys, and you knew that. But as we get into this whole idea where there was this more grim, gritty kind of feel to comics, then you started to see some of that stuff switch, where you had characters that switched sides and changed, and you weren't always sure for sure, were they making the most morally sound choice in what they were doing.
How do you think that affects, back to the 5 kids, how do you think that affects the younger readers? like you and me, it probably doesn't affect us that much because we have a sense of morality as adults. But if a 6-year-old is picking up a comic book, which some are appropriate and some aren't, let's face it.
Yep.
What do you think what do you think that generation that is coming up as comic book readers is getting from these comics? Do you think it's still the moral compass that it used to be, or do you think it's gone?
It may have wavered a little bit, but I think, you know, society as a whole has changed in a lot of that kind of respect too, right? You know, stuff that we see on TV shows that air weekly that are geared to be kind of like an all ages or a family kind of show. Growing up, we would have never seen that on TV, maybe in movies, but they would have been rated, you know,
PG-14
or some of it even into like rated R kind of stuff, you know. I think the relaxing of society's acceptability levels of that kind of stuff is kind of steered to where that is. And I mean, I'm not saying that it's 100% wrong in a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of stuff being depicted nowadays in all entertainment mediums that sometimes makes me question or cringe a little bit.
That makes sense. Sometimes too much of a good thing is too much of a good thing. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we are coming to the end of the interview. We normally do about anywhere from 8 to 20 minutes, and we're way past that already. So we're going to end it. But I always end it with a simple question. And because of this COVID crap, what's one thing that you've done today to make yourself happy other than this interview?
Other than this, oh man, I don't know. This interview was kind of like my pinnacle for today. So one thing that I've done, I actually, when I got up this morning and I finished my breakfast, I went outside with my youngest daughter and we got her bike seat all adjusted up and everything like that, because it had been something that she's, you know, it was rideable, but not 100% rideable. And she's asked a few times to do it. And I said this morning when I got up out of bed, I said, you know what, one thing I'm going to make sure that I do today is make sure that I get that ready for her so that she can get out. And I mean, yeah, in this time of being quarantined and stuck at home and stuff like that, this is one of the points. Like, we had actually just moved right before this happened, and when the snow melted and everything, and we could bring the bikes from the old house out, my kids, the girls, were all so excited because then they could get out of the house, right? And they had something that they could do outside. So that was my big goal for today, this morning, not even today, but just this morning, was to make sure that I had her bike fixed up so that she could take off and go for a ride today and just ride around town and be outside and away from everything for a while. So yeah, that's my big highlight. I mean, I've done a bunch of comic book work already this morning on new projects that are in the works and things like that. But yeah, it was like this morning's like interview, getting Ainsley's bike ready. I hit those things, we're good to go.
You know, a lot of people are really worried about this stuff going on. And the truth is that it's been a blessing in a lot of ways. I never would have started this show if it hadn't happened. And honestly, the connection I have with my kids is way better because I actually get to spend some damn time with them. I think it's something society's been missing, and it's a reset that we all get to do. Right.
Definitely.
And yeah, maybe get off the screens for 15 hours a day and start actually talking to human beings. We are going to end the interview. All of the watchers who've watched, I want to thank you. This is the Jesse Lewis Show. This is Jeff Burton, Aurora Man over there, the creator and all that stuff. All his links, I believe, are below. If you want to talk to Jeff, I'm sure he'll talk to you. He's on Facebook.
You betcha.
Twitter, all the other places. Check out the audio adventures because they're great. And before we end, I just want to say, please like and share the show if you like and want to share the show, and follow the Jesse Lewis Show. And follow Aurora Man, too. See you later, everybody. Jeff, wave bye. That's what we do.
See you guys.